So we have on the terrace stage David Helgason and Rene Rechtman having a fireside chat. So everybody, please join us. Rene, he's been very successful, part of the media, entertainment, and tech startup scene since the late 90s. During his career, he's done 3 significant exits. Recently, he was an investor and president at Maker Studios that later was acquired by Disney. And today, an advisor for several companies, and also listed by Wired as one of Europe's top most influential people. Joining on the conversation here, David Helgason, very familiar also to the Danish local startup scene, founder and previous CEO of Unity Technologies, and also, as we are TechBBQ, part of the steering board here. So let's give a big round of applause to Rene and David here on the terrace stage. We're shutting off the microphone, so if you want to join the conversations, you better find yourself here. Here's plenty of space. Everybody closer. Okay, the stage is yours, or the grass field is yours.
I've known Rene for a few years, and I am happy to count him as a friend. And I kind of wanted to have a conversation about his path as an entrepreneur, which I think is, both very successful, but also unusual in that Rene has been successful both as an entrepreneur and also inside the companies that acquired his companies. Kind of that's what I want to focus on. I think we have half an hour. I want to take questions as well, so think about questions. Actually, since we're kind of in this intimate format, maybe you can just shout them as they occur. We won't be offended, or you can store them for afterwards. Actually, just let's start. Where's your background? Where did you come from?
I'm pretty local. I'm from Copenhagen. Grew up not far from here, and studied political science at University of Copenhagen, and I was convinced that I will go into the Minister of Foreign Affairs or the European Commission or anything like that. And
real job.
like a real job, yeah, that's what I thought at least. But what happened was I had a trainee period in the European Commission, which was one of the most disappointing thing I've ever tried. And as soon as I came back to the university, I thought, oh my God, what can I do not to work for any of these institutions?
What was wrong?
Everything was wrong, right? There was no clear vision. There was no teamwork. There was no spirit of trying to make a difference. Everybody was focused on their own salaries and tax-free benefits. I'm not against EU, by the way. That's not the point. And there was an arrogance to consumers and citizens that I haven't met ever before. I didn't meet before or ever since. It was very disappointing.
Wow. So how did you get into startups? What was your first foray?
So here's the thing. I again took a normal job after university in a marketing and PR company, and very luckily, within 6 months of doing really boring things like supporting the pig industry with marketing materials and different environmental agencies, the Steel Association of the World called and said, we would like to employ you to work for us, because a Minister of Environment back then, Svend Auken, went out in media and in public and said that steel was very bad for environment, aluminium was very good for the environment. The reality is both is very bad for the environment, right? And then I had a connection down in Brussels due to my trainee period, and within 6 months, I was the highest billing consultant, just out of university, but of all of Nordics. So they offered me very early a partnership, which I, of course, rejected. And then I said, it's time to do something else. And then I was very lucky to meet the founders of The Body Shop. I'm a bit old, so it's back then. And they were spinning off a management consultancy within sustainability, and they asked me if I want to join and start that. And I said, absolutely, let's do it. So we started that consultancy. It got some very big clients very quick. And then it was acquired by KPMG Management. and I didn't join KPMG. I left right away, and then fast forward, it was '99, and the startup, the first bubble, was as big as it could get. And of course, I joined as a proper entrepreneur the bubble. And I was very lucky that two Swedish guys came to me and said, hey, you want to join this company within affiliate marketing? I didn't understand anything, but I really liked the two guys. And I said, absolutely, let's do it. Yeah, the two guys were Felix Hagno, which is one of the biggest shareholders in Spotify, and Martin Lorentzon, who founded Spotify and is by far the biggest shareholder still today. And I think I had lunch with him in Stockholm, and you were there as well a few months ago. And I asked him, Martin, are you the richest person now in Sweden? And he said, I'm not sure, but at least the two people who might be rich are 85, so soon I will be the richest person. Right, yeah. So that was how I started, and we were very lucky. We IPO'd the company 7 years later. Yeah, we didn't explode like everybody else in the first bubble. And, you know...
What kind of IPO was it?
It was an IPO on OMX in Stockholm, a proper IPO. We IPO'd, I think it was for 375 million euros back then. And that was probably the second biggest exit in Europe in the space. I think Kelku was sold to Yahoo for 450 million a few months earlier. Yeah, so that was very good. And I think the spin-off of that was not the money that we made, but it was the fact that suddenly you had second-times entrepreneurs in Europe, which was very, very new. Things that Silicon Valley knows about, and probably is the big success of Silicon Valley, is that you have second, third, and fourth times entrepreneurs. But it didn't really exist in the European environment back then. There's somebody I know from back then. Is that Rune? Hi. Rune was one of our clients. He was running Nokia Nordics back then. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So yeah, Nokia was a small client. I'm sorry. Yeah, but I forgot the question. Yeah.
I was actually curious about this IPO. We're supposed you don't know this, but like there's supposed to be a conversation tomorrow about IPOs, and I'm kind of mixed about these kind of small early IPOs.
It wasn't early or small back then, right? I mean, compared to Unity, it was very small. But 375 million euros back then was pretty big, right?
A little thing.
Yeah. And it was not early. It was 7.5 years into the business. Sure. We raised seed funding, and then we raised 10 million and another 10 million.
Did you have the stability that was required?
Yeah, we were printing money back then, and actually within 6 months after the IPO, Yahoo AOL wanted to take us off the stock exchange and gave a bid on just below $1 billion, which we all supported. But then we had some pension funds and banks that blocked it because they got greedy, and then it was time for me to do something else. And then I was very, very lucky that Klaus, who is there, just started a company with his friend Balder in affiliate marketing, and we got introduced, and Klaus told me, hey René, I need somebody like you to help me grow the business. I say, Klaus, can I invest? No, we don't need money. We need somebody like you. And I say, I don't know. And then Klaus, being one of the best salespeople in Europe, he literally sat like this on me for a few months, and I fell in love. And of course, I joined as a partner in the business, and we were very lucky. We scaled it very quickly, and 3 years later, we sold it to AOL. And we were actually in the dilemma: should we sell or should we raise 10, 15 million to go properly into the US? Remember that discussion? We had it like over a few board meetings, and our not investor, but our institutional shareholder basically wanted to push us towards the US, which I thought was a good idea, but we needed real money to do it. And there was, of course, risk associated with it. And, you know...
Which year is that?
This was 2006, no, 11, 10, yeah. Yeah, we sold 11, so that was 2010. We didn't plan to sell.
No.
It was inbound request, and we didn't even have bankers or lawyers, and so yeah, it went really well. So that was the second one.
And then you actually decided to be corporate.
No. So basically, what happened was Klaus left London, went back to Denmark with his wife and two sweet children. I stayed in London, where I've been now 14 years. AOL wanted Jimmy, who was the third partner, and I to stay, and they basically gave us an offer we couldn't refuse for 2 years. And after a year at CES, I took the CEO of AOL, Tim, aside at a Starbucks and told him, listen, this is not for me, right? And I don't really enjoy it, and I don't think that I fit in. And then he wanted me to come to New York, but I didn't want to. And then we made a gentleman's agreement that I don't leave the company for another 6 months. He will pay me for the full 2 years. And I stay, and I left the business around September, I think, that year. And then I promised my wife that I wouldn't work for 6 months, which I kind of didn't. But so I didn't have any meetings before 10 and after 3, so I could take the kids to school, and then I could pick them up. But then you invited me a few times to Silicon Valley, so I kind of traveled between London, LA, Silicon Valley, and then back to London to find inspiration. And I found these founders of a business called Bossa Studios, who I thought was awesome. They were like fantastic. They created this democratization of creativity around YouTube, and I loved it, and I could just see the scale of it. But it wasn't a business, and me and a few other people then invested a lot of money, and I planned not to do anything else. And then I got a call from my co-investor, Inan, that he just moved to LA to become the chairman and potentially CEO because it was a car crash that we invested in.
Why?
Because it wasn't focused. And that's a discussion you and I have had many times. I think focus is everything, right? It was a movement, unlimited at scale, so it ticks all these boxes. But the founders were so unfocused that it was a catastrophe. And we raised a lot of money very fast at Maker. So I joined, which wasn't the plan. We wanted then to go and raise 150 million to take it to the next level. And then Disney, in that process, decided that they wanted to buy us. So it was a very quick exit.
How did you you had been around online video a lot before, right? So what was it? How did you recognize Maker when you saw it?
So I actually tried to buy Machinima, if some of you know Machinima, which was kind of the first big, fast-growing video IP platform within gaming. But I visited Alan and his brother Philip a few times in LA, and again, I could see in the numbers what they sold me was not what the numbers represented. It was not where the market was going. I thought they went into this spiral of Hollywood instead of focusing on gaming and video. So I felt that it was not worth getting involvement. And that's how I met the Maker Studios, who was much smaller at that time and much more vibrant and interesting. And so everybody knew that the video would explode. I mean, the consumer behavior changed with the technology. So back then, technology made us all change our behavior, and we knew that video was happening, but we knew that already at Goviral. We're just too early.
Yeah. So in sort of building my own company, Unity, one of the things I sort of came to learn is that core ingredients to building a big company is to kind of find a way to not sell, and you sort of failed at that, right? So how did that come around?
I completely agree. And when Disney gave us the offer and we had the discussion on the board, and I didn't want to sell because it was a movement and it was unlimited at scale. It's very rarely you sit on a business idea, on a business that can just grow and grow and grow. And it looked very feasible for us to raise 150 million to take it to the next level. So I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Not because of the exit upside, but literally because I thought it was wrong to sell. And the discussions we have now in On and I is that he now admits it was probably wrong to sell. But anyway,
But it was a good acquisition.
I mean, for Disney, it was a wrong acquisition. We should have sold to Google or somebody like that. Simply because, by the way, I'm a huge fan of Disney. I spent 3.5 years at Disney. It's one of the most phenomenal companies you can imagine. But the reality is Disney is a very traditional company that makes 50 billion in net contribution every year.
What?
Yes. And if you have 300 million in revenue, which we had, Nobody really cares. And we didn't fit into the studios. We didn't fit into the traditional TV or licensing or parks. So you don't fit in. You only make 300 million in revenue. You get neglected and then very quickly shut down, right? But what they did get was a lot of knowledge to the new world, a lot of knowledge about consumers and the changing behavior. And they got some good people that then locked up for 2 years, which is what American companies typically do. They lock you up for 2 or 3 years. And yeah, so that was it.
So you did what people do in jail. You studied.
Yeah, I wouldn't say jail, but yeah, I was very lucky. I studied a lot, and I was reporting into the global chairman. So Disney does these strategy sessions every year with the CEOs and head of regions, where they have to provide a strategy plan for the next 5 years based on consumer behavior and trend studies, and they're very high level plans, as you can imagine. But I was one of 4 people in the company who was following those plans all around the world. So the first year for me, it was like a gift. It was like, oh my God, these super intelligent people with really, really strong backgrounds who know what they're doing are sitting in front of you and pitching their idea. It was great. It was amazing.
Like an internal VC kind of thing, yeah.
It was amazing, right?
Can you sum up like some of the things you learned there? Like this is for my benefit, actually.
So there was a few things. So you have seen Game of Thrones, I guess, or House of Cards. That's 20 to 30% of politics that's happening at Disney level, right? So Disney is much more cynical than any of these series, right? So I did learn a lot about politics and yeah. But the fun aside, what you learn at a place like Disney, and any of you who have taken MBAs or similar in the US, that's at least the feedback I get, you learn to think big. Don't waste time on anything small. Think very, very big. And Disney only thinks big. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. And then also, Disney is really taking care of creative people. It's probably the best place to be as a creative person. So when I ask Ed Catmull or any of the Pixar founders, why are you still here? They say, because we love to do animation. This is the best place in the world to do animation. So taking care of creative people was very interesting. And the last thing I learned was the brand. I mean, I've never, ever met anyone so cynical and so aware of the brand values, and they really take care of the brand. They don't do anything that will step outside of the brand. So I think these 3 things on the serious matter. But the politics was extremely fun because I knew I would not stay, but it was amazing.
So like just a spectator. so you'd learned all this, and that inspired you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I had some learnings from Disney that we have shared many times, but also from Maker Studios. One of the problems with the Maker Studio model was we didn't own the IP. We aggregated other people's IP. And if you don't own the IP, you have difficulty exploiting it commercially. And a lot of the IP that we managed also had issues because it was the PewDiePies of this world were using third parties' IP to create their own, so we couldn't monetize it outside the habitat of YouTube. So we saw that very clearly, and then I look into the data when I kind of went into the Disney side, and more or less 50% of YouTube was music. Music is very difficult, so I kind of kept away. And the other thing I noticed was that around 30% was kids, like kid stuff, right? When I went into a bit further into the data, what I realized was that out of the 30% kids, the 100 biggest IPs that our kids are watching is no brands. It's no names. It's not IP that we grew up with. It's not Disney. It's not Nickelodeon. It's not Mattel or Spin Master. It's basically mom and pop shops, right? And those of you who are familiar with the record industry back in the 50s and 60s, it was very similar. Right? There would be people in Copenhagen that were very good at identifying jazz musicians. Somebody in Liverpool was very good at identifying rock and roll, and then you could continue around the world, but it was very local. Onto Clive Davis and some of the big labels we know today went in and aggregated these IPs. So, there's lots of opportunities. We talked about in gaming, with gaming studios. There's a lot of middle-sized gaming studios around, especially Europe. So there's a play to do the same as you did in the music industry, go and aggregate them and create one of the biggest game publishers in the world. You need a lot of money to do it, of course, but it's possible. Nobody owns young women, so women between 16 and 25. There's no brands that own them. Netflix hasn't really cracked that. There's also a big opportunity, a lot of good IP spread all around the world in that space as well. So there's a lot of opportunities. So I'm thinking very Disney-like. How can you build a franchise in a market that is developing fast and where there's opportunity?
Do you have anything to share, or is that for next week?
I mean, I can share that I will do something in the kids space, and I raised a hell of a lot of money, but that's it.
By the way, in full disclosure, I'm a small investor, so I'm a big fan. I think we're running out of time soon. Any questions that came up along the way? We're happy to answer almost anything.
Any questions?
Yeah, cheers.
How did you guys meet professionally first?
Yeah, we met professionally. Or actually, where did we meet? I forgot.
So I think the first time we met, you were sitting near Dronningstværk, somewhere down there in a basement doing your startup, and you shared office with somebody else. That's how we met the first time. But the second time, more serious, was when you just moved to the US.
I was never in Dronningstværk.
No, not Dronningstværk. It was down in Fredrikstad, and I think somewhere there. Yeah,
Oh, and Holmen.
maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. But we met when he just started his company, and then later on we met actually in San Francisco. We shared some similar VC friends, and they say, "Oh, you guys are Danish, you should meet," or something like that. Yeah. Many years ago.
Yeah. Are you? Oh, Benjamin.
Aside from focus, what is the advice you give to entrepreneurs you meet that are just getting started?
I mean, get a amazing team. If you can get really strong people who are better than you in all aspects, you have taken another big step, right? If you need to raise money, you need to have a very focused business plan, but you also need to have a killer team. So that's important. And the third thing is, like I said with Disney, you need to show an idea that is unlimited at scale, or at least can go very, very far. Nobody any longer will invest in local ideas or things that won't be able to scale it.
Do you think it's possible to build these type of companies anywhere, or do you need to move, or do you need to
No, I think in the world we live in now, absolutely, you can build it anywhere. You just need to have access to talent, and capital, right? So you might need to spread around to get the talent. I mean, you can talk more about that than I. But what we did when we raised money at Maker, we made sure that we raised in Asia, in Europe, and in the US. So at least we have access to capital on these three continents. We're all very important for us, for our market and our business. When it came to talent, we basically had LA, London, and Singapore as the hubs. But I think you guys have been chasing talent everywhere.
Yeah, like Unity is such a complicated product to build. There's so few people that actually know how to build it. So we end up like with 25 offices, which is his own discipline, by the way. Quite a lot of fun.
Yeah, but you're searching talent for programming and yeah. So my companies are less dependent on deep tech talent, but more on creative talent and product talent. There's a question somewhere there.
Do you need a microphone?
No, I'm from New York. I can yell. It's fine. First off, I actually worked with the brand Kidsbop, which you might be very familiar with creating video content. I'm actually starting a video-based travel app in which we're pulling content from users that are uploading. What would you say is the biggest piece of advice for working with other people's content, trying to monetize off that?
I think what you should do very early on is make sure that when you use third parties' IP or content, that at least it's cleared, because clearing it afterwards, what we tried to do with Maker was a headache. People were doing great content, but then they had a Starbucks on the floor or on the table, or they had an Adidas sign on their T-shirt, stuff like that. Make sure it's cleaned for everything. So even, create the framework, and we did that too late for the creators to create in content to you. Make sure that they don't breach these simple license and IP rights that you don't really want, because you won't be able to monetize it later on.
Cool. So you're based in London?
Can I just say another thing? So I had a dinner with BBC Thursday night, and there was a woman from Philadelphia who just met a boyfriend in Denmark. She was in the 40s, I guess he was as well, and she told me, "Listen, you're the first kind of Danish man that I meet outside my little private sphere. Can you tell me, are Danish men very reserved? Do they have difficulties communicating?" And I said, listen, it's difficult for me to generalize, but I think it's definitely a Northern European problem that networking and small talk is not prioritized. And I just want to say, it's wrong. You have to network. You have to be out there and meet people. It will be a huge benefit, either in recruiting the talent, raising money, or later on potentially selling or buying other companies. It's very, very important. Forget this kind of Scandinavian reservedness. It's not superficial to go out and small talk. It's part of international and global culture. So please, don't be afraid of speaking to each other and networking. It's really, really important.
Which I think brings us to the end of the talk. So I think that's kind of homework for today. René, thank you so much for sharing. I learned a lot. So I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.